deadly temptation worth tens of millions. How evil can human nature truly be? Late at night, a black man in sunglasses entered a pawn shop. He pushed the door, looking mysterious. This pawn shop did honest business, but also handled sensitive items for customers. But anyone lacking the guts to mess with them would face a merciless choking. The fat man nearby was just one day late. His pawned item from last month was now a tattered wreck. The shop employee, annoyed, kicked him out. This Happendoy Doig was now a tattered wreck. The shop in daily because they had strong backing. The black man then smiled and approached the employee. With just a glance, the employee recognized a 20th century French-style watch looking exactly like an antique, but the bezel showed wear. Yet hearing it tick confirmed it was working, which was good. The employee looked up, but the black man had vanished. He'd been about to check the situation. Once things settled, his accomplices entered from outside. Their meticulous plan put the pawn shop entirely in their hands. But the explosion caused death, so they had to act more carefully. Armed, they quickly set rappelling lines on the stairs. They sped down, catching the guards off guard. The bald man approached, unaware a guard was right behind him. Both attacked simultaneously, but the bald man clearly had the upper hand. After subduing all the guards, they crept deeper inside and captured a smartly dressed manager. As he fumbled to escape, the black man raised his hand and shot him in the arm. The manager, losing his nerve, immediately betrayed his boss, leading them to the vault. He then opened a secret compartment, revealing a coded door inside. He knew opening the door likely meant death, but trembling, he entered the code. Stacks of cash instantly excited the entire group. When the black man pointed a gun at him, the manager knew his fate was sealed. He spat a bitter remark, then died on the spot. The group then began stuffing thick stacks of money into suitcases. They took tens of millions in cash. Once sure his men were clear, the black man unhesitantly tossed a grenade inside. This was truly a massive haul. The scent of cash filled them with euphoria. The boss was extremely pleased with his crew's performance. But getting the money wasn't the end. Now they had to lay low, live exactly as before to avoid attention, and absolutely not turn on each other. In 10 days, they'd reach Jace. They'd wait to ensure no one followed, then split the money. On the way, the pilot thanked the boss for letting him join the transport, so he'd get a cut of the money. But the black man doubted his competence. In recent days, an old crew member had been mercilessly removed from the gang. The boss dealt with useless people cruelly. After a tracking device was attached to the money, the loot was loaded onto the plane. But he never dreamed the plane would malfunction mid-flight and crash. Damn it, hurry. 5 months later, on the silent frozen land, a safe with a tracker surfaced through the ice. A cold drop hit the sleeping Holland. He opened his eyes, realizing it was morning. Since his wife's death, he'd lived in a suspended state, caring about nothing. But to find traces of his wife's existence, he clung on, living each day on this land. He built a small fire, grilling some wild meat for his meal. This harsh open-air life had become his daily routine. The taste was nothing special, but it provided enough nutrition to sustain him. Holland took his gear to his pre-drilled ice fishing hole. Suddenly, he saw something very strange in the distance. Closer, he realized it was a human arm. A frozen body had suddenly surfaced from under the ice. The sight shocked Holland. Nearby, a black box caught his eye. Holland pulled it from the ice with all his might, then forced open the coded lock. Stacks of $100 bills appeared before him. Holland could barely believe his eyes. He then looked through the ice below. It was the wreckage of the crashed plane from the robbery crew not long ago. That night, he returned home and drank hot soup. Millions in cash lay silently beside him. He had no idea what to do next. The next morning, the female officer left for patrol, her child still feverish. A neighbor helped out her young husband, so she felt somewhat relieved. Looking at her life, if her grandmother were alive, she'd feel at ease. But knowing her grandmother, she might have risen from her grave just to scold her. She had left her tribe in a way they'd never accept, living alone on ancestral land. Soon she arrived at the town's campsite management office. The police chief was already waiting. 2 stubborn men insisted on ice camping just as the ice was melting. She knew this land intimately, living minute by minute. And going onto the ice now was a bad idea. They said they'd driven over 75 miles and couldn't leave empty-handed just because of her. The man begged her for help, but the female officer was not one to compromise principles for politeness, so she frankly and decisively refused their request. Moreover, the weather was constantly changing. The current ice was barely 4 inches thick. Unfamiliar drivers could easily crash, but they wouldn't listen, stubbornly insisting on going for fun. The next second, the female officer opened her trunk and took out a wheel clamp. And the next second, they knew her well, quietly noting the 2 rich men had paid a lot. Even if they fell through the ice, they'd be responsible, not him. He told her to concede a little to smooth things over. But moments later, the men found their wheels clamped. The chief feared conflict, so he advised them to leave the area. The female officer was a park ranger with independent authority. The two men reluctantly drove off, annoyed. Immediately after, the female officer removed the clamp, not making further trouble. The chief grumbled she'd miss out on fun living like this. Then he told her an old man's pickup truck was stuck on the ice. Someone familiar with the terrain like her was needed to help. If she handled that minor issue before dinner, she should join the party tonight to relax. The female officer said her child still had a high fever. She wasn't free for parties tonight. Just then, a former crew member, the priest, who was also a town local, appeared. This month, he'd been consumed by remorse over that robbery. By day, he played the role of God's messenger, caring for lost souls. But as a true criminal, he never had a moment of peace. That day, after presiding over a funeral, a familiar face suddenly appeared at the door. The black man in glasses still looked as cunning as ever. Seeing him come all this way, the priest immediately knew his peaceful days were over. "Can you spare a moment for a sinner to repent?" "How can I help you?" "There's one thing you can definitely help with." The black man said the tracker signal vanished yesterday. That proves someone violently removed it. The plane crashed months ago, cost them tens of millions. Now, as they're about to recover it, the signal is cut. Luckily, the last data transmission confirmed the plane crashed in the ice lake. Finding the right location means they can access the site. Then they'll use diving equipment to retrieve the goods. The priest, being indigenous, naturally had to help. Indigenous people in that pristine, icy region are not easy to deal with. Trespassing on their territory could easily cause conflict. Initially, the priest seemed indifferent, but when he stepped outside and saw the cold, malicious eyes waiting, he knew he had no escape. The black man told him he'd better cooperate. The bald man had already scouted the ice lake. If he helped, they would remain a team. After all, their glorious past victories weren't false. The blood on the money was real. The priest was then escorted to the ice lake. Recently, he'd been having constant nightmares. He dreamed they were all reborn in a place as beautiful as paradise. The group included a man nicknamed Drake. He had long been dissatisfied with the gang's old hierarchy. The power-sharing rules annoyed him. He only needed one chance to prove himself. Once he got his share of the money, he would immediately leave to pursue his own goals, all for operating capital. Elsewhere, the female officer drove her pickup to the rescue site. The ice lake's melting rate was much worse than she'd imagined. Even the priest realized in just 10 more hours the ice would completely melt. Just then, the black man saw the GPS signal was still moving. He thought the shifting ice had swept the plane away, but the priest suspected someone had beaten him to it. The black man's expression immediately changed. For days, he had been certain it was safe there. Hearing this, he almost thought the priest had exposed their secret, but he wasn't the only one who knew this vast icy terrain. Though he hadn't told anyone, those who lived on the ice had sharper senses and instincts than them, so they'd better get there quickly to avoid ending up empty-handed. At the same time, the female officer spotted Ted stuck on the ice. His luck was clearly bad today, stuck on the ice. His luck was clearly bad today, running into a warm current, but judging by how far down he was, a strong tow might pull him out. While the female officer was handling the rescue, she saw Holland walking on the ice, approaching. Ted knew Holland and said he was just a wanderer, because they weren't the only ones who lived off this land. As Holland walked past the female officer, she immediately stopped him for inspection. It was still winter fishing season, and someone like Holland wouldn't have a fishing license. But in the next second, the officer found a huge amount of cash in his bag. "What the hell?" And wanted to explain it was just lost property he'd found. He'd just pulled it from under the ice, but the officer wouldn't let such a big fish go. She drew her gun, demanding Halen submit to arrest and questioning. This unexpectedly entangled him in disaster, yet Halen remained very calm. Since his wife's death, he'd felt little emotion for most things, so he let the officer collect all his self-defense weapons, then obediently offered his hands for handcuffing. As for where the money came from, the officer decided to report it to the sheriff before proceeding. As for where the money hid, seeing this, also suspected he'd been involved in something. When the officer said she'd just arrested a wanderer, the sheriff initially thought she was just making trouble again. But when he saw the bag of cash, his eyes visibly lit up, even through his sunglasses. Just then, the black man's group tracking the signal also arrived. At first, the female officer didn't pay attention, thinking they were just tourists. But seeing how they formed up, she immediately realized something was wrong. The black man pulled out a tracker and asked her if she had mistakenly taken his belongings. The officer now understood they were after the money. She initially intended to feign innocence until the black man drew his gun and aimed it directly at them. The priest quickly tried to stop them from using violence, but the black man only cared if his money was still all there. The priest quickly checked the truck bed and found only one bag of money. He immediately asked where the rest was. The female officer stood bewildered until the black man raised his gun and shot her ear as a warning, just as he was about to do it again. Holland suddenly lunged, tackling him to the ground. Before his accomplices could recover, Ted nearby grabbed a gun and fired back, saving them. The female officer returned fire and tried to drive away, but she forgot the tow rope was still attached to Ted's car. Just then, the blonde woman shot Ted from behind, killing him. Seeing the officer's pickup truck sliding on the snow, Holland rushed over and cut the tow rope. He then quickly climbed into the truck bed. Seeing the money about to be stolen, the blonde woman immediately drove her car straight at them. She jumped into the truck bed and struggled with Holland. As she clutched the suitcase tightly, refusing to let go, Holland put all his strength into a kick, knocking her off. Just then, the suitcase slid and fell straight into an ice hole. In an instant, millions of dollars sank to the bottom. The black man and his accomplices were furious. Luckily, he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Otherwise, Ted's shot would have sent him to his ancestors. He yelled at everyone to get in the car and chase, but the tires had been shot out during the chaos. The black man ordered his henchmen and the priest to change the tires. The blonde woman ran off to call the bald man for backup. If they left now, they could still catch them. Angered by this blow, the black man swore revenge. The female officer asked Holland where the rest of the money was, and who those gunmen were. But Holland himself was completely clueless. He only knew the plane's crash site, but he truly didn't know where they came from. Holland said there was more money on the plane than in that suitcase, but he never intended to claim it. He just accidentally appeared at the wrong time and place and got caught up in this deadly opportunity that pushed him to the brink of death. Initially, the female officer just intended to check a fishing license. She didn't expect to have a gun pointed at her head and almost lose her hand. She knew she wasn't a seasoned criminal detective. Meanwhile, the bald man received the blonde woman's call. Knowing big trouble had occurred, he immediately drove straight to Ice Lake. The female officer also quickly contacted the sheriff, reporting that many gunmen were heading toward town, so he'd better call for backup to save her. The sheriff didn't expect the situation to be so complicated. Just catching a petty thief had turned into a life or death matter. However, the female officer hadn't told him everything about Holland because he had just saved her life. After the sheriff promised to arrive quickly, the female officer finally breathed a sigh of relief, but ironically, her car stalled right then. The fuel gauge showed it was empty, clearly a result of the earlier gunfire. They had no choice but to walk back for help, but walking several miles on the ice was clearly not a good idea. The female officer took out a rope. One had to be well prepared when walking on ice. Haaland initially didn't want to involve her, so he planned to split up because they could still drive after him. Haaland then asked the female officer to unlock his handcuffs. That would at least help them move faster. After a few seconds of hesitation, the female officer realized he had a point, so she decided to uncuff him. Mike had a few seconds of, but if he had any bad intentions, she would shoot him down on the spot. Haaland quickly returned to the pickup truck to get his belongings. Then the female officer gave him a safety rope. In case one fell into an ice hole, the other could rescue them. Elsewhere, the priest saw an owl flying across the sky. It reminded him of a story from long ago. A native once lured an entire U.S. Army unit, 30 soldiers, into this area. The American soldiers were fully armed, but the native, knowing the local terrain, led them near an ice hole into the American soldiers when the ice began to melt. But if he turned his back on his accomplices now, the black man would show him he had no way out. If you dared to deal with the devil, you also had to accept the price. Meanwhile, the female officer and Haaland had gone quite a distance. Soon they would reach a temporary shelter. The female officer scoffed at the others, saying they had no idea who they were messing with. Just then, the ice surface vibrated slightly. The black man's group was driving to catch up, seeing their pickup had stalled. The blonde woman realized the other suitcases weren't in the truck. The black man used binoculars and spotted two figures in the distance. He immediately told his accomplices to speed up the chase. Alice frantically steered. No, 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 hold tight. Alice slowed down, form a line, hold hands tightly. The whole group blanched, not daring to make rash moves. Finally, the priest was the first to regain composure. He told Alice to hold the steering wheel tightly and not let go, but Alice just wanted to jump out of the car and escape, unaware that losing balance would only make the car sink faster. Immediately after, the priest told everyone to form a human chain, using belts to pull Alice out. At this moment, it was their only lifeline. As Alice moved to the passenger seat, he suddenly felt the car shake violently. In that moment of hesitation, the ice, unable to bear the weight, completely broke. Luckily, Alice managed to grab a belt. The three of them pulled with all their might, pulling him up before the car fully submerged. Alice was soaked from head to toe, losing all his usual arrogance. His near-death experience left him trembling uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Holland and the female officer were unaware of what happened behind them. Both were hesitating, unsure which way to go. It turned out Holland's wife was from the same tribe as the female officer. People had long thought he was just troubled, claiming to wander to find his wife's soul. It turned out he really had a family. The female officer said the sheriff would soon bring reinforcements, but Holland suggested going to his old shelter. It was closer than their current direction, and he had left some gear there. Weapons was safer than just relying on a pistol, but the female officer knew the ice melted much faster in that area. Yet to save their lives, they had to take the risk. She then decided to follow Holland. Unexpectedly, the black man's group met the bald man first, not the sheriff. No one expected such a large group to be outmaneuvered by a ranger and a wanderer. The black man ordered the bald man to lower the snowmobile. He told him to chase the two others first, and the others would drive around the thick ice to reach the shore. This would avoid unnecessary risks. By then, Holland and the female officer were close to shore. But Holland did not know her gun was out of bullets, that had kept him fearful for a long time. Just then, the ice below them began to crack. This was clearly not a good sign. Reluctantly, they had to run at full speed on the ice. Although extremely dangerous, the shore was very close. Even if they fell in, they could swim across. Just then, snowmobile engines roared behind them. Their time was running out. Hayland and the female officer scrambled ashore. Hayland turned to look at their pursuers, then immediately ran to get his bow and arrows. He skillfully nocked an arrow, then set up hunting traps near the shore. Though these items had an illegal origin, at least they could help them overcome the immediate danger. They could only hide in rock crevices, using the terrain to escape. To erase their tracks, the female officer led Hayland directly into the icy river. The biting cold water almost froze his entire body. The biting cold priest followed their tracks to the riverbank. To save energy, he chose another path. By now, Holland was completely exhausted. He struggled through the icy water to keep up with the female officer. She quickly used a branch to erase their tracks on the ground, but these actions only bought them a little time. Ironically, this led the priest's group into black bear territory. Under thick, dry leaves were numerous bear traps. The priest quickly warned everyone to be very careful, but the blonde woman ignored him, still chasing Hayland. She also cursed his superstitions as nonsense. It was all a fabrication, but the very next second she fell into a trap. Damn it, a sharp branch even pierced her palm. Only then did they realize they were in trouble. A wounded accomplice would greatly slow their pursuit. She groaned in continuous pain. In this biting cold, without timely bandaging, her hand would need to be amputated. I got it. Elsewhere, Hayland and the female officer found a cave to rest. The black man also helped the blonde woman to a shelter at the mountain base. Tonight, someone certainly would not sleep. When she took off her glove, her hand had already begun to turn black. Luckily, the black man quickly helped her retreat, otherwise her hand would surely be lost. Elsewhere, Holland removed his soaking wet clothes. The female officer held him close by the fire to warm him. This helped him gradually escape hypothermia. The female officer then asked about his deceased wife, and why Holland wandered everywhere to find her soul. He knew his wife had truly died, so he had lost all direction in life. Elsewhere, the blonde woman also felt empty. No matter what, she had to catch the two of them. Not just for revenge for her boyfriend, but also to find the money's whereabouts. The boss always spoke of teamwork, but each person had their own agenda, and sooner or later this would lead to their downfall. Originally, she and the bald man planned to finish this job and retreat. They even dreamed of having their own child, but now all of it was gone. Holland silently tormented himself over his guilt. When his wife and child died, he was still in Afghanistan. He knew his wife was not weak. She simply could not escape the pain of losing their child. That was why she pushed him away, because he was not a good enough husband or father. In the end, he did not even get to see his wife one last time. The only thing left was the feeling that his wife was always with him, even if it meant becoming a despised wanderer. Late that night, Drake drank to forget his fear. Today, he had almost drowned in that car. The priest quietly walked over to comfort him. Drake did not believe in an afterlife, so this time he had to grasp everything. In truth, the priest once dreamed of such a life, until he followed the boss and realized God did not exist. From then on, he betrayed his own faith. Looking at the car lights illuminating the night, the priest knew the coming days would be very difficult, because the boss was obsessively insane. His subordinates' incompetence made him lose face. It even forced the bald man to give up. The blonde woman's wasted state made him pause. With the blonde woman, he had painstakingly built this gang over many years. All were those who followed him from the beginning, but recently he vaguely sensed betrayal. On the other side, Holland finally began to build a friendship with the female officer. He took out his wife's photo to show her. Inside was also his amulet. The female officer also took out her own amulet. Those special symbols were her spiritual support. Everyone born has a reason to exist. Sometimes they get lost and confused. In the female officer's tribe, there was a spiritual ceremony. It was used to send off and commemorate loved ones. After the ritual, they still had to move forward. He could not bring his wife back to life, but at least he could let go of guilt to continue living, and his wife surely wanted him to truly live. At the same time, the boss put away his last bit of compassion. On the table were a butterfly knife and a bloody bag. In his view, family was not a refuge, but something created by people. Only by cherishing what they had could they talk about the future. But now he discovered a traitor within that family. Drake was someone he picked up from the streets. He was still too young. Sometimes impulsiveness was a privilege of youth, but even small animals understood loyalty. The boss truly did not want to believe Drake betrayed him until he found Drake's accomplice, Ethan. After cutting off one of Ethan's fingers, the boss learned Drake planned to betray him and form his own faction. However, the boss was not overly angry. Losing people's loyalty was his fault. But if Drake dared to tamper with his things, that was different. Faced with the threat, Drake immediately collapsed, kneeling and begging for his life. At this moment, the priest's role truly came into play. Without hesitation, the boss stabbed him directly. Forgiveness could wait. Drake did not even have time to cry out before being sent directly to God. The boss never gave a second chance to those who betrayed him. Just a small pawn, yet daring to challenge him. That was what enraged the boss most. But Drake was still lucky to have the priest by his side in his final moments. Witnessing his accomplice's tragic death, the boss's face remained impassive as he continued to assign tasks. With Holland and the female officer escaping, he was not worried about things getting out of control. This land was only so large. Once dawn broke, they could hardly escape his grasp. That night, Holland fell asleep from exhaustion. At dawn, he and the female officer set out for the Black Tribe. From afar, the chief saw their figures. He welcomed the female officer back, but showed clear resentment seeing Holland, because he was the one who took a tribe member away, then left her to die in the wilderness. Holland might not recognize him, but the chief was Maikai's uncle. He witnessed his niece being drawn into a distant escape, and ultimately dying tragically in the ice and snow. Holland tried to explain things were not as he thought. His wife's death caused him extreme pain. He did not come to justify his mistakes. And we hope they understood he and Miki had lost their child together. Though he took Miki from the tribe, he gave her happiness and freedom in those years, not stubborn adherence to this land her whole life. Finally, the female officer had to speak up to stop the argument. They had no time to debate right and wrong. She told the chief she was being hunted. A tribe member had also died at the enemy's hand. Hearing this, the chief did not make it harder for Holland. And as dawn approached, he led them and his people back to camp. The black people believed souls did not vanish after death. They wandered lost between heaven and earth. The ice was like a seal for the soul. In the darkness, there was a karma fire waiting for the sun to awaken it. Beneath this lake was a silent, dead forest. Simply put, it was methane gas buried for tens of thousands of years beneath the lake bed. So they should best stay away from those gas bubbles. Though they should best by then. The boss had led his men straight to the camp to demand the people. Holland and the female officer could only hope the sheriff arrived with reinforcements in time. Without supplies in this ice and snow, they would surely die. The Black Tribe people naturally disliked outsiders. They especially hated being separated from their ancestral land. The female officer was a rare exception. She had negotiated with outsiders on behalf of the tribe, protecting their rights and land. Therefore, the chief gave her gratitude and respect. But if she sided with outsiders against her own people, that protection would be limited. So the chief told her to leave his sight before he got angry. Because of this stubbornness, the Black Tribe's situation grew harder. Just then, the boss received word from an insider. He knew Holland and the female officer were hiding in the tribe's territory. Before his enemies knew they were exposed, he decided to give them a deadly surprise. Halen didn't mind the tribe seeing him as a triber. Insults like lackey were already mild. Here was no Betal, officer into more trouble. Halen knew the plane crash site. If conditions allowed, he was ready to leave alone to protect the female officer and Maikai's tribe. Just then, the female officer said she contacted the sheriff. Reinforcements would arrive in 15 minutes. Halen then met the chief. He hoped the chief understood the immediate danger. Their pursuers were not simple. Their true goal was the money on the crash plane. Halen himself didn't want that money, so he wanted to secretly make a deal with the chief. With the money on the crash plane, Halen himself didn't want that money. He wanted to protect the tribe for his wife and join them. But winning trust also needed a way to make the chief hesitate, unsure whether to accept the terms. Just then, the boss found the priest, who was full of doubt. The boss told the priest that life is not a straight path. He could get off at a station, walk freely, and find his own life. The priest didn't want his family threatened. He was ready to give up his money for freedom. But once on this boat, getting off wasn't easy. Besides hoping God would cleanse his sins, he couldn't shed all his mistakes and withdraw. The boss told him to stay calm. No matter what he faced, everything would quickly resolve. The boss before him made people shiver with fear. Just then, the sheriff drove his patrol car to the camp. Seeing her colleague, the female officer finally sighed in relief. Seeing the sheriff's unfriendly attitude toward Holland, she quickly explained Holland was on their side. After confirming, the sheriff felt somewhat relieved. He said he called the special forces and they would arrive soon. The female officer asked how many reinforcements he called. The opponents were numerous and armed, but just then, a remark from the sheriff stunned her. He knew about the hidden money plane. The female officer remembered only mentioning the money brief. She only learned about the plane crash later. The sheriff realized his slip-up but didn't hide the greed on his face. He even threatened her to tell everything she knew. At least that way she could share a cut like him. The female officer finally understood the sheriff was on the boss's side. He didn't care about returning the items to their owner. The female officer directly asked how much he got from this deal. When she heard 5%, she fell silent. She pushed the sheriff away, refusing to conspire with him. Rejected, the sheriff got angry. He immediately drew his gun, forcing them to follow him. The chief and Halen exchanged a look as if they understood each other. Then he escorted Halen and the female officer into the car. The car sped toward the plane site. The priest and his accomplices waited for the car arrive. For the Tiampsis, Shushaf to arrive for the sheriff to wave. For the Jill. Seeing the boss take out his lighter, the priest quickly reminded him. Below were countless methane gases waiting for a mistake. To his old friend, the boss advised him not to do anything foolish. Once that money was theirs, they could freely enjoy a new life. Just then, through binoculars, the boss saw the sheriff's car. He'd already partnered with the sheriff beforehand. Now he hoped the surprise gift would amuse Haaland, but he didn't know Holland had already seen through it. The sheriff only pursued personal gain. So Holland deliberately stated a much larger number than the sheriff imagined. Compared to a 5% cut, it was better to let him lead them directly to the plane site. These words quickly sparked the sheriff's interest. Holland said if he agreed to release them safely, he would tell him the exact location. But both had their own intentions. From the start, this deal lacked trust. Holland said the plane site's location was on his GPS device. He had already entered the coordinates. If just as the sheriff believed him and bent down, his hand was caught tightly by a hidden animal trap. The excruciating pain made him panic completely. The police car skidded violently on the ice and flipped. The boss cursed, ordering his men to rush over immediately. Holland pulled the female officer out of the car. Seeing the sheriff lying unconscious nearby, they intended to disarm him. The next second, he unexpectedly struggled to his feet. Holland rushed forward, intending to finish him while he was weak, but the sheriff pointed his gun, warning him not to come closer. He was now as dangerous as a wounded animal. The accident completely disfigured his once handsome face. Holland could only find ways to dodge the bullets in that rage. But he seemed to have a severe concussion, making him lose his lucidity. Several consecutive shots all missed Holland. Just as he regained his senses, the boss shot him in the head from behind. Holland and the female officer quickly hid behind the flipped police car to avoid bullets. He almost had no chance to peek out because the blonde woman shot extremely accurately. Holland could only place his hope in the sheriff's gun lying next to him. He took off his jacket, preparing to take a risk. But in that life-or-death gunfight, Holland was unfortunately hit by a stray bullet. Just then, the boss quickly stepped forward and fired another shot, hitting him. If the boss didn't still need him to lead the way to the plane site, he would have been shot to pieces by now. The boss seemed to enjoy Holland's tenacity, but for the female officer it was different. She had no value to him, not even a disposable item. The priest couldn't bring himself to harm her, so he handed the gun back to the boss. Anyway, he decided to withdraw from the gang. Though he had shed too much blood, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The priest sincerely wanted to change, but the next second, the boss shot him from behind. What he could not tolerate most was betrayal. Just as the boss prepared to harm the innocent, the priest pulled out his lighter and threw it at his feet. The fire immediately ignited the surrounding methane gas. The boss's jacket caught fire, making him unable to escape. In an instant, the methane gas under the ice lake erupted fiercely. Everyone rushed to flee the area. The boss, who stayed behind, was finally swallowed by the sea of fire and died completely. Holland risked his life to escape, but the female officer was cornered and taken by the black man. Holland chased to a warehouse by the lake. He saw the black man holding a gun to the female officer's head. He threatened Holland to reveal the plane site's location. Once he got the money, he would leave immediately and cause no more trouble. But seeing Holland still trying to play smart, he immediately shot the female officer in the back of her head. He told Holland to think carefully about the current situation. If he wanted to make demands, he had clearly found the wrong person. But he didn't expect that action to awaken the female officer's survival instinct. While the black man was distracted, she secretly ambushed him. Unfortunately, Holland was too severely injured to exert strength. Soon, the black man knocked him to the ground. He slowly approached, forcing Holland to reveal the plane site's location. Just then, the female officer strongly pushed the gun from behind, hitting the black man directly. Seeing Holland escape from the warehouse, the black man immediately chased close behind. The female officer continued to attract attention, creating an opportunity for Holland. His sneak attack hit its target, but the force was too weak to finish off his opponent. Finally, Holland was pinned down and tortured by the black man. Where is that damned plane? At the crucial moment, the female officer suddenly tightened her grip around the black man's neck. As he prepared to pull the trigger and shoot her, Holland on the ground saw a broken piece of wood. The next second, he grabbed the sharp end and stabbed it straight through his throat. Seeing the black man's hateful expression, Holland used all his strength to shove him into the melting ice lake, sending him to meet the money at the bottom of the cold water. The crisis finally ended. Holland and the female officer collapsed to the ground, panting, relieved that both were still alive. A few days later, one early morning, Holland went to a nearby ice lake to wash. His wounds were almost completely healed. This bath was because the black tribe allowed him to perform a special ritual to reunite with his deceased wife. As the sacred smoke filled his chest, Holland finally saw the woman he longed for day and night. The chief also officially accepted him as part of the tribe because he had brought back enough money to build a hospital for the villagers, helping them no longer suffer from illness. Finally, a new life began. Holland could also move forward without lingering regrets.